So, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Luke Carwadine, and I'm an Android developer at Line for the client. And today I'd like to discuss clean code through understanding and communication. Now, when we think about clean code, we often think of coding principles and patterns, but often messy code can come about because of poor requirements or poor designs that are given to the engineers. So these poor designs and requirements can come about through a number of misunderstandings. People may be misunderstanding the problem that needs to be solved. People might not actually know the best way to solve the problem. Or it could be there's an issue with language. So I've got a bit of a silly example here. We've got a data class representing a sofa. And a sofa has a number of seats, and it's got a colour, and for some reason we have a Boolean saying, is car. Why would a sofa be a car? What were the requirements that led to this decision? And what was the problem that was actually trying to be solved? Like, none of this is obvious looking at this. And you often go and ask another engineer, why did the code end up like this? It's what the business wanted. Well, was it what the business wanted? Probably unlikely. The business doesn't understand the code base. The business is marketers and designers and planners and people who don't code. The business may have changed direction, as we'll see in a moment. So the developer must help guide the design and the requirements to help the code base stay clean. So the core of this is understanding the issues. What is the original problem? What was actually trying to be solved? And don't assume, if you come in late, don't assume that the given proposals, designs, requirements, or solutions are actually correct. The person who came up with those may not have actually understood the issues to begin with. So to address this, the first thing we need to do is establish roles and responsibilities. So we need to introduce all the stakeholders in the process as early as possible. That way everyone can get their voice heard from the start. And make sure the stakeholders know who to communicate with if they run into an issue. There's nothing worse than sitting there and hitting a bug and then going, I don't know who to talk to, and wasting time. Raise issues early to avoid fix business decisions. If a decision's made that then marketing takes somewhere for 6 months and then you realize, whoops, we can't go back on this and it's going to affect all the underlying code base, then you've got a major problem. And if no one wants to take responsibility, stand up and take hold of it yourself, if possible. If you do that, quite often, if someone does actually have responsibility, they'll stand up and tell you otherwise. So moving on to a scenario with this, the odd business requirement. So the business has made decisions that are fixed and can't be changed. Now, this might have been due to lack of stakeholder input or people not wanting to take responsibility. And unfortunately, the code base really doesn't reflect where the business is going. So in this scenario, the business has decided to sell cars in addition to sofas because someone thought sofas and cars have seats and colours, they must be similar items. So the requirement was given, sales system must support sales of both sofas and cars. The problem with the current solution that I had before is while they've sort of got similar properties, a car isn't a logical extension of a sofa. So in this case, a better solution would have been this, to have an abstract class that's an item, and now have a data class that represents a sofa and a class that represents a car. And this also has the added benefit that future items that the business might decide to sell can also have new properties. And with this, our adjusted requirement should have been sales system must support sales of new types of items. Moving on, we need to make sure discussion occurs whenever issues come up. So keep communication channels open. Use multiple channels if need be, meetings, chats, whatever. And you need to take language differences into consideration. Typically at Line, most projects at least have 2 languages used, if not more, on them. And quite often, stuff can get lost in translation. Ask questions early. If you think you need to ask something, just ask it. You're not going to look stupid. And this goes to my next point. Ask the obvious questions to ensure that everyone's on the same page. Double check that what you're thinking is what everyone else is thinking. And if you don't understand, really, just ask. It's not going to be an issue. So in our second scenario, lost in translation, the language used in the requirements or the business does not match the language used in the code base. And this can be both with a natural language, where we could have Japanese to English or vice versa, or the business language is non-obvious. That is, it's jargon. It's something used within the business only. So in our scenario, wheels are being added to sofas. Object plus wheels is a car in a fictional language, whether it's a natural language or the business language. So the requirement was must add if sofa is a car. But the problem with the solution I showed before is the language in the code base isn't obvious to someone who is only just seeing the code base and is unfamiliar with this. So if it's a translation issue, this is a really simple fix. Our val has now become has wheels. That's a really straightforward, obvious one, and the requirement should have been must add if sofa has wheels. In the case that it was business jargon, we've probably got a bit of a better solution here where the code base still reflects that the business calls a sofa with wheels a car, but the underlying code tells me that a car is a sofa that has wheels. So a new developer can see this and instantly understand what is car means in the context of a sofa. Next is viewpoints. People have different viewpoints. People have different understandings of how to achieve stuff. Not everyone comes from the same backgrounds. Not everyone's an engineer. And even among engineers, we come up with different solutions to the same problems. So before coding, think, does the requirement or the solution or the proposal or whatever's been put in front of me to do make sense? Because if it doesn't, you shouldn't go forward. You know, think to yourself, is a key factor missing? Am I misunderstanding the problem? Is someone else misunderstanding the problem? Are there unknown requirements? Maybe server side had a requirement that isn't reflected on the client side, and that's why certain decisions were made. And lastly, it could be translation issues, as I've mentioned before. So in this scenario, a sofa location must be updated when moved. Person making requirements considers movable objects to be cars for whatever reason. So the requirement is must add is if sofa is a car and cars can be moved. And the problem with this is, well, the requirement doesn't make sense. So we need to go back and double check what's trying to be achieved here. And our code may end up looking something like this once we've gone back and resolved it to our adjusted requirements. So sofas must be movable. It's got an interface and we override the onMove function to update location at some point in time. And lastly, if you've got an issue, push back. Don't be afraid to speak up if something doesn't seem right and you don't think you should be doing that. And firstly, be polite about this. The quickest way to shut down any discussion is to call someone's idea stupid or something like that. And when you go to pushback, explain the problem clearly. Make sure the person understands why there is an issue and what is actually wrong. And if you can, suggest alternatives. If you just show up saying this is wrong, do something else, people are like, well, what's the input that you want to give me here? So if you've got an alternative idea, make sure you suggest it and bring it up with them. And that's all for today. So thank you very much.